back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. Today I'm going to be stepping into the wonderful era of the Fourth Doctor as I take a look at the most recent 4 adventures from the Season 7 line, as released recently by Big Finish, I do believe back in January this year. Now, the Fourth Doctor era has slightly changed format from the previous audio releases that we had last year, considering that the Fourth Doctor is in fact one of the most iconic Doctors in Doctor Who. I've not really delved into his era on Big Finish that much, so I decided this year that I would change that, especially with the new format coming in of the physical adventures I'll get onto in a sec. But I think that I've only gone on to 3 adventures so far, one of being the Beast of Cravenos, so I only went into that one, admittedly, because Jago and Lightfoot were in it. And then I stuck around, I do believe, for 2 releases last year, being the Silent Scream, which was like an American-themed episode in Hollywood. And then there was also the Sontaran Battle episode as well, I do believe, called the Eternal Battle. And those reviews kind of faded out, partly because the format is a little bit awkward to film with, due to the episodes being around 1 hour long, much like, say, Dark Eyes or Doom Coalition or Classic Doctor's New Monsters. Just to film one review based around one story that only lasts 1 hour is a little bit time consuming, and considering I will be fine with it if it's a monthly range because those episodes are 2 hours long, so there's a lot to talk about. So it kind of feels that to review one episode over a 1 hour duration is just a little bit pointless to an extent. So now the new format has came in, then it's kind of a little bit easier for me to do, meaning that I can kind of expand my Doctor Who Big Finish content, so that is rather helpful for me. So what is this massive new format that I've mentioned already several times throughout this video? Basically, it's really good actually for everybody who normally collects the physical editions as well as the actual download. I do believe that either way you actually save money. So basically, much like Dark Eyes and Doom Coalition, they've decided to block up the series of Fourth Doctor adventures, so it's now split across 2 4-part box sets, so you get 4 releases. However, you can also get them singly as well on the normal download. So if you decide to buy all of the adventures as a part of the Season 7 line, then you can get Season 7 Part 1, and it includes the first 4 audio adventures on physical CD for £35 on the recommended retail. The pre-order price is in fact £25, but I do believe by the time this video goes out it will be up to the recommended retail of £35, and I do believe the download is £25 or something like that, or maybe £30. However, if you just want to buy the download releases for individual single episodes, say if you want to pick and mix certain stories from this year, then you can also do that. All you need to do is just pay £8.99, I do believe, for the download, so you can get those separately. However, you can no longer buy the episodes physically and separately at the same time, so yeah, that's just down to the way that things work, and obviously it's rather expensive to in fact print CDs these days, so it would be nice to in fact see other lines go like this. I think that the main reason the Fourth Doctor range has in fact gone like this is because it's only 1 hour stories, so I think it may be a little bit not really economically valuable if it was a part of Big Finish main range. It would be brilliant if they could do that, considering those are literally £15 a month, which is quite expensive. But yeah, I think that it is a good format, and generally you do save money, I do believe, so that is something good if you are a collector of the Fourth Doctor line. So I will leave in the description below the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. I will leave both the physical edition as well as the singular downloads as well. So in this video I am in fact going to be covering the first 4 stories from this year, and then no doubt I do believe in May or the month after May I will probably cover Season 7 Part 2 or something like that, depending on what reviews I'm doing at that time and how busy I am. Literally the only reason why I'm currently filming this review today is because I'm meant to be at college and there's a ton of snow outside. If you live in Britain you will be aware that we've currently got a little bit of this snow thing going on. I do believe it's called the Beast from the East or something like that. But yeah, I'm basically homebound for today, meaning that I can film quite a few videos and actually get things done with my life, so that's brilliant, isn't it? Now all of the technical details are out of the way. What I'm going to be doing for this review is taking a look at the first 4 stories, being of which The Sons of Kaldor, written by Andrew Smith, episode 2 being the Crowmarsh Experiment by David Llewellyn, and then the 2-part series sort of mid-finale type thing, which is The Mind Runner and The Demon Rises by John Dorney. So both of those episodes are written by him, and then it is overall directed by Nicholas Briggs. I'm not really going to go into the individual people in this cast because there is quite a lot of them, with it being 4 stories. However, I will briefly go over the main protagonists. So as per usual, you have Tom Baker as of course the Fourth Doctor, and he's really good for this, in fact these whole releases. I think that Big Finish do this really good balance between a rather serious side of this Doctor, but at the same time a really funny side as well. I think that several points throughout listening to these, there's some really nice sort of warm fuzzy moments where I thought, oh, he's a great Doctor, something of which that I didn't really have in the actual TV show itself. I'm aware that the Fourth Doctor is one of the most popular Doctors, however sometimes I didn't really quite get why. I think that maybe in some extent he can be overrated. However, Big Finish kind of make him a Doctor that I like a little bit more. I like the quirky side to his Doctor, I like the one-liners that he has, and generally the relationship that he has with K9 as well, which is something that I'll get onto in a sec with John Leeson. I just think it's really nice, it's really comforting and really alien at the same time, and the brilliant thing with the Fourth Doctor is he does feel like an alien. He doesn't fit in with society, and no matter where he goes, he kind of causes a commotion, but at the same time saves the day as well. So we've got Leela in there as well, played by the wonderful Louise Jameson, and once again, a similar thing to Leela in the actual TV show. I must admit there was a few occasions where I didn't really get why people enjoyed her companion. I think that she just seemed a little bit annoying to an extent at some point. However, I did enjoy her in some stories. I think that especially with some moments I do quite like her. I think most notably maybe the Robots of Death and the Towns of Weng Chiang. I do love those stories. However, there's a few occasional ones here and there. In fact, her debut story being The Face of Evil, which I did in fact think she's a little bit just dull and annoying in. However, once again, Big Finish have adapted her character, and it is in fact very interesting to have this companion on board the TARDIS team that is a little bit unusual, a little bit alien. Sort of the most normal things, even say taking her to present day Earth, is a big deal because she doesn't understand technology, she doesn't understand the way that humans work, and it means that all the time she references certain things like, I can smell death, or that man has a look of death on his face. She's very tribal, very sort of savage-esque, and I think the Big Fish really do capture that very nicely, and I'm looking forward to delving into her character a little bit deeper in other releases. And then finally, for the main protagonists, we have John Leeson as K9. I must admit, I think that I can in fact recall in the previous Fourth Doctor releases that I've reviewed, John Leeson is in fact probably the highlight for this release. I absolutely adore him. I don't even think that he is in all of the episodes. I think that mainly he is only in the series finale, or mid-series finale, being the Mind Runner in The Demon Rises. He only seems to be in that one as an actual major part. It sort of has a little bit of an absence between the Vok Robot story and the Crowmarsh Experiment. I do believe that he may not even be in those episodes at all, which I don't mind. That actually happened within the TV show. Sometimes he was in it, sometimes he wasn't. It kind of depends on the writer, really, of what they would like to do. Would they like to utilise K9 or not? And throughout the episode that he's in fact in, being the series finale, I think that he is really good. He just has some brilliant, once again, brilliant quirky moments. He's incredibly monotone because he just has these lines. He's a very logical thinking robot, but because of that, he is very funny. Leela will ask these random questions, as she always does, because she's this savage tribal woman, and then K9 takes that incredibly literally and just says, for example, there's a moment where the Fourth Doctor thinks that they've gone to America and they're in New York, and literally Leela thinks that the people of New York, or the tribe of New York, actually eat a thing called the Big Apple, because naturally people call New York the Big Apple. And K9 is asked this question, and then he says something like, I do not know the answer, or something like that, or cannot compute. I just find him funny, and he is a brilliant character. And the wonderful thing about Big Finish's version of K9 is he doesn't have the flaws the TV version does, because he is naturally a robot. He can move a lot quicker on Big Finish. He could be a lot easier to operate because they don't physically need an actual prop. He can be around, and the way they can actually remodulate his voice as well. John Leeson is just absolutely brilliant. So he is the robot dog. Is my favourite thing about this entire release. I just love him, even though he's only in 2 of the 4 stories. So going on to the first episode, being The Sons of Kaldor, written by Andrew Smith, I would like to kind of think that this episode is the flagship for this release, because it is on the front cover art, and it is the return of the Vok robots, which I was rather excited by, not gonna lie. I think that if this story wasn't in this release, I would have been a little bit like, what is its selling point, apart from the fact it's Doctor Who and it's got the Fourth Doctor in it. I feel that I needed something to kind of push it out there. Much like how last year we have Jago and Lightfoot and the Sontarans, this year we've got the Vok robots returning, and naturally with this release I've not watched the Robots of Death in a very long time, but I just love the Vok robots. I think that the development of their character throughout this story is incredibly fun. Once again, I love the way that they speak, incredibly logical, incredibly monotone, especially when that is compared to the Fourth Doctor that asks some rather bizarre questions here and there, and when that is paired with the Vok robots, it is really some funny moments. And I think that the sort of advantage of using this rather emotionless robot is a question of, what if you give these robots emotions and actually give them feelings? And they have that sort of line between what is a sentient robot, what is an actual creature, and sort of on the basis of not exactly human rights, but sort of alien rights, kind of, what is defined as an actual species. And throughout this story we have a development of Vok robot that sort of go on to be their own race, and at the very end we have them sort of asking for the hand of friendship, because this planet of Kaldor actually think that they are against the robots, and they have this there's laws strictly against them, and these Vok robots essentially sort of want to make friends with this human colony, and as I say, extend the hand of friendship. And it kind of shows how mankind can always be the aggressor and kind of always be bad, and sometimes in the universe there is in fact good things out there as well that want to be friends with us, and this is a great example of having these rather logical creatures that are just there wanting to make friends. And for example, in this story there is a main robot that is in fact the one on the cover with all the damaged sort of headgear going on. He is this sort of main control robot that got damaged, and he draws pictures on the wall, which, not gonna lie, I was really emotionally hit by that. I don't know why, but just the concept of having a Vok robot drawing pretty pictures of the forest outside on his wall because it is pretty and I want to remember it, as he says in his voice throughout that story. I think that once again as well, that relationship between Leela and the Vok robots is really nicely experimented with as well, considering that she already knows them from the Robots of Death. And yeah, I like this story, but I couldn't help but think I wanted a little bit more. For the 1 hour format, considering it is the main selling point of this release, I just wanted it to be pushed a little bit further. I could quite willingly probably have this in fact as a two-parter and have this whole idea extended and maybe developed a little bit further. However, the actual concept of having this 1 hour story is really nice. It sort of keeps it precise, keeps it really tight, and always keeps the viewer guessing as well. I think that throughout this story it passed really quickly. It didn't feel like an hour. I just wish there was more of it, which I guess is a good thing but a flaw at the same time. Moving on to the Crowmarsh Experiment, which is a story that I had absolutely no idea about. This one is written by David Llewellyn, and I like to think that this one is the underdog for this release, because I would probably say that these two single-handed episodes at the very start of the box set are my main highlight for this release. I think that I definitely prefer these over the two-parter written by John Dorney, even though that episode still has some really nice moments in there. I just think the Crowmarsh Experiment is literally, I want to sort of avoid the cliche of saying incredibly experimental for a story with the word experiment in the very title, but it is very experimental. It keeps the viewer guessing constantly throughout. I can in fact remember listening to this story and thinking, what on earth is going on? Are we all sort of all being played here by the Doctor? Is the Doctor the one that knows what's going on? Is Leela dreaming? Because this is basically Leela's story. We go into Leela's mind and we go into sort of Leela's thought process, which, bearing in mind once again Leela is this sort of savage tribal alien, it's a little bit more interesting than what it would be with a standard female character. And I just think the way that we have them essentially go to this institute which is all about the mind and basically the process of dreams. And dreams is naturally a very interesting thing as it is, and the fact that Doctor Who doesn't really manipulate that is a little bit questionable. I think that it's an absolutely brilliant format that you can play with and has many different sort of effects you could do with it. What if aliens took over your dreams? What if your dreams were in fact real but sort of a parallel universe or something like that? This whole story bases on the idea of what if you're in a dream but you think that dream is reality? A little bit confused by it, but at the same time I love the idea that David Llewellyn has kind of brought this rather sort of dystopian future kind of technology into the story. Incredibly futuristic, even though I do believe it's based in 1970s London or something like that. With the Doctor being this rather interesting character, being a rather sort of actual doctor, as in a practitioner doctor in a sort of institute type thing. And as I say, that whole idea of playing with Leela's emotions is really fun, and I think that once again I found myself actually listening to this story and wishing it went on a little bit longer. And I think that often with the 1 hour format you can get going with these really good stories that are actually very precise and very tight, as I say, and it sort of is a great example of actually showing what that 1 hour format can do and the flaws of the 45-minute format in the current TV show that we've got going on. So yeah, it would be just brilliant to see that running time extended a little bit more. But at the same time, the Crowmarsh Experiment is just one of those episodes that gave me a really nice feeling by the end of it, and I thought, this is what Doctor Who is about. This is why I like it, and sort of this is why I was really involved in it, and it sort of kept me guessing all worth. So yeah, a really good story, and if you're wanting sort of a little bit more from Doctor Who, almost a little bit Black Mirror-esque, I guess, you could buy this release singularly if you are solely just interested in this one. On to the final two-part story written by John Dorney, which, much like in the actual singular releases that we had last year, occasionally you do get that two-parter in there, which I do think is a little bit unusual, selling essentially half a story, being 1 hour each on either side. I think it is a little bit unusual. It's something which they used to do, I do believe, with the older 8th Doctor adventures. But yeah, this episode is once again a rather unusual one based on the idea of a developing technology on a sort of colony planet. However, it gets a little bit more twisted in the sort of second half half, and the demon rises, as you can sort of suggest, it has that alien idea behind it of being rather sort of satanic and kind of this force that is hidden on this planet. And the whole idea behind the Mind Runners is rather unusual as well. The black sort of mirror element is sort of coming to the very top in this release once again, much like in the Crowmarsh Experiment, where we have this idea of technology where people can essentially hack other people's minds and kind of be in people's minds and sort of hop from different people and experience certain things that are going on throughout the planet. And there's this whole idea of a sort of conspiracy that has been hidden up by essentially their equivalent of a parliament, and they want to keep it all under wraps. And the way they do this is by killing people. But about the Mind Runners is that idea of technology, and then in the second half of the story it goes on to a little bit more of that extraterrestrial idea of having, as I said, this alien sort of force. So we've got technology in the first half and aliens in the second. I feel like John Dorney has probably had the idea in his mind for this story for quite a while, because it feels like one that he's kind of thought about in a dream or something like that, because it feels like an episode that he's kind of had in mind for a while and sort of has added to over time. Because I think that to start with, you have this whole idea of this story of people hacking minds, and then it hops to this next thing, and then it hops to this next thing, and then it sort of fans out to be all these different problems that of course all come together at the very end and is resolved. And I think that the nice idea with this is that it does in fact keep hold of all those ideas and all those problems and actually creates a rather satisfying ending at the very end as well. I think that the final act wraps up everything nicely, which is something that can't really be said for new series stories. I think that when they go a little bit adventurous with stuff, then they sort of fall at risk of actually not tying it up at the very end. An example of a Big Finish version of that will be Doom Coalition. I think at the very end of that series, you do have a little bit of a unanswered feeling about it. It can be a little bit of, not exactly a cop-out ending, but a little bit of a stereotypical ending that could have been done just a little bit better. But I think that John Dorney has definitely handled the idea in this story quite well, and definitely handled all the elements and sort of brought them to a satisfying conclusion at the very end as well, rather nicely. But yeah, the main thing for this one of that whole idea of hacking minds is rather intriguing, rather interesting. But once again, I wanted a little bit more of that. If anything, I think I would want the alien aspect actually took out of this story, and it being developed completely around the idea of technology and people hacking minds and maybe hacking people's lives, or maybe like pretending to be people. This is the grim bit, and as you can tell, I quite like it. We have this idea of them using a spaceship, and the workers that have made this spaceship have in fact not exactly donated their body, because that would sort of entail that they had permission to use them, but they kind of, out of their, none of their free will, they've basically just been added to this giant rocket. It is essentially made out of the people from this planet. So you've got a giant rocket made of skin, which is a little bit grim, which is a little bit as well. I think that generally it's just a little bit uncomfortable, and I think that John Dorney handles it quite well. I would have loved that to be developed a little bit further. Also, maybe going into the whole idea of how they made this spaceship, maybe like a body part spaceship or something like that. I don't think that would be too grim for Doctor Who, but I think that this idea for the story, like over the two-parter, has a lot of elements where it could have gone off but just didn't. I feel that this almost could have been two whole separate stories together, and then one episode could have been based around the alien idea and say the planet rocket thing made of skin, and then the other one could have been based on the idea of people hacking sort of people's bodies or something. So yeah, we had two ideas that were played with, like the idea of having the realism behind that and the ideology versus sort of cybernetics in there as well. But yeah, at the same time, I just think, as I say, it could have been a little bit more experimental. I just expected a bit more, especially when this followed the Crowmarsh Experiment. This is definitely one of those things that sort of suffers from the episode that was before it, its predecessor, especially as well with the Voc Robot story being before that. Two rather experimental ones, and then we have this two-part one that I just sort of felt that could have been essentially a bit shorter. I think if anything, you could have had the Mind Runners and Demon Rises being one story, and then sort of the Voc Robot story being extended to two, or even the Crowmarsh Experiment being extended to a two-parter, although that might have been a little bit less effective. So yeah, maybe the Voc Robot story being extended and then this series finale sort of being cut down or something. Mind Runners and Demon Rises also has a rather intriguing villain behind it as well, something of which that may be sort of wrapped up in a future story. I don't particularly know. It's kind of left open to sort of have the opportunity to come back to it at some point, which is nice. I like it when they have things sort of left open, necessarily need to be done, but hey, it's nice to have a few references here and there to kind of make it feel like one big universe coming together. But yeah, generally overall, for these four stories, I think that it's a rather nice one. If you're somebody that is a fan of the Fourth Doctor and Leela and K9, this is very much quite reminiscent reminiscent of the era, but at the same time not being completely 1970s Doctor Who, and I like that. I like it when classic Doctor Who actually develops itself a bit further and then makes it a 21st century programme and then has that idea of cybernetics, future technology, that whole idea of mental health in there as well, having sort of the mind being took over in the Crowmarsh Experiment and the differences between reality and dreams. I thought that's a brilliant story. So by far, in fact, the Crowmarsh Experiment is my favourite for this release, and I think that the Sons of Kaldor as well, the whole concept behind the Vok robots gaining sort of sentience and emotion is a brilliant idea, and I would love to see that develop further. But I think the sheer idea of this whole box set is nice. It goes to different places, and I think that it is one that I do recommend, as I say, if you're a Fourth Doctor fan. But at the same time, if you're looking for somewhere to get into Doctor Who, I think that the Fourth Doctor era might be a nice place to start, considering that this is essentially sort of 3 or 4 separate stories. Then you definitely go to sort of 3 different areas of Doctor Who and 3 different sort of experimental sections. Yeah, it gives you sort of like a nice taste. As I say, it's a little bit of a pick and mix, so it is kind of up to you if you'd like to buy the physical CD, which I sort of have a thing about the physical products. I like to buy them if it's one of which that I really do like. I like to add it to the shelf. That's kind of my way of sort of showing that I really do like the release, sort of getting the physical version, because naturally it would take up a lot of space to have every single one. But I think that if you're somebody that wants to buy them all, then definitely buy the physical one. But if you'd just like to pick and mix of this series, then you can buy sort of the singular releases on download as well. And that is it for the Season 7 Volume 1 review, and I guess I may see you in the Volume 2 review, which is coming out, as I'm just checking now, in May, where we have 4 other stories, one of which called The Shadow of London, the other one called The Bad Penny, and then another one called Kill the Doctor and the Age of Sutekh, written by Guy Adams, of course, featuring, as you can tell by the title, the return of Sutekh. That will be incredibly exciting, and I can't wait for that one, because I've not in fact listened to the other Sutekh story, being the one in Bernie Summerfield. So yeah, it will be intriguing to see what they're going to do with that, and I can't wait to see the cover art for those releases as well, which no doubt will be coming at some point in the near future. So yeah, that's it for this release. I guess I'll see you all in another Doctor Who Big Finish review, or any other Doctor Who review at some point in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.